The entire decentralized finance ecosystem is centered around the core principle of not having a middleman. That has been the case since DeFi growing from a mere $10 billion in total value locked in late 2020 to more than $105 billion in total value locked in late 2021. But what is the limit to this decentralization? And is there even a limit to it at all? What happens in instances where decentralization becomes more of a destructive force than a catalyst? These are the questions we will try to answer on today's very special CoinMarketCap episode. My name is Trev, and here at CoinMarketCap, we love making videos about all things crypto, from crypto news to market moves and to even educational videos just like the one you're watching right now. And if you want something more than just hype and to actually learn about crypto, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and also to turn on post notifications so you're not going to miss out on a new video. So anyways, guys, let's just dive right in. So what are the limits of decentralization? Perhaps one story can give us an answer is the world of curve wars. Curve wars refers to various protocols fighting against each other to provide the highest yield to their users on Curve Finance, which is a decentralized stablecoin exchange protocol that lets users trade with lowered fees and slippage using liquidity pools akin to those used in Uniswap. And there's a lot to unpack with that statement, so let's start with the basics. Curve Finance is a stablecoin exchange that lets users trade between various stablecoins using liquidity pools. Since it is decentralized, the protocol itself does not have access to your tokens, but just like Uniswap, you make the trades against a liquidity pool. And there are two features that distinguish Curve from other protocols: minimal to no impermanent loss. Curve is a stablecoin exchange, which means that users can only trade stablecoins against each other. This means that the volatility of other coins, say Bitcoin and Ether, do plague the protocol. Since most stablecoins are almost similarly priced, there is very less slippage and thus minimal impermanent loss. And the next point is high APYs. For every trade that happens on Curve.fi, the liquidity providers who supply liquidity to the trading pools are given rewards that are equally divided between all the providers. Thus, when there is a high volume of activity on the protocol, the APRs tend to go higher. And contrarily, on days of low volume trading, they can get quite low. So why provide liquidity on Curve Finance? The question then arises, if there is no volatility on the protocol, which liquidity providers exploit for benefit, then how do traders actually make money? Curve has been focused on enticing liquidity providers, LPs, to its platforms by offering them derivative LP tokens of the assets that they provide to the pools. This introduces composability to the protocol, which means that users can utilize the derivative tokens issued by the platform to further participate in the DeFi ecosystem. And this is a huge add-on for crypto users, because usually once locked, users are unable to generate any further yield from their assets. So what is the Curve DAO token, or CRV? Whenever a LP provides liquidity to any of the pools on Curve, they get rewards in CRV, which is the governance token of the Curve protocol. Since Curve Finance is a decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO, it ensures that the protocol and its subsequent decisions are not made by anyone else but all holders of the governance token. Thus, whenever you deposit native tokens to a liquidity pool, you get CRV tokens in return in addition to the fees and interest. And you can also earn the token via yield farming. And now this is where it gets interesting. Users who have reached a threshold amount of CRV tokens can vote lock and update to the Curve protocol. These updates vary anywhere from altering the fees to creating new liquidity pools and even voting on adjusting the rewards earned on yield farming. CRV token holders are required to hold the tokens for a duration of time before they are allowed to vote on proposals. The longer someone holds the token, the more voting power that they have on the protocol. Here comes the Curve Wars. Now that you have a basic understanding of how Curve Finance works, this is where it gets interesting. Curve Wars is a non-zero-sum game that sees protocols exerting dominance over the protocol across a spectrum. It is said that there are no losers in Curve Wars, but only winners. The strategy is a bit convoluted to understand, so I'll break it down here. So let's talk about how to attract liquidity on Curve Finance. Your objective as an emerging decentralized stablecoin protocol is to offer attractive yields to your users. And if you don't, then your protocol will end up being a barren land, as there would be no one to provide liquidity to your stablecoin pair. Now, to attract liquidity to your platform, you can do multiple things. You can set aside a majority of your token supply to facilitate extremely lucrative liquidity mining rewards for every user that supplies liquidity to your stablecoin pair on the Curve protocol. Or you can alternatively buy a handsome amount of CRV tokens to further influence the governance and alter the liquidity mining rewards for your pool. Or you can bribe, yes, you got that right, bribe other CRV holders to vote in the favor of increasing rewards on your stablecoin pair. Now, imagine that another emerging DeFi stablecoin protocol is trying to do the same thing, but with Convex Finance. Convex Finance is an additional DeFi protocol that sits atop Curve Finance. It rewards CRV liquidity providers with additional yields. You can simply repeat either of the steps that I talked about previously, or combine them for an amplified effect to increase the rewards on your liquidity pool, thereby A, attracting more liquidity, and B, increasing the price of your governance token. Popular DeFi protocols like Yearn Finance, Convex Finance, and even Stake DAO have been competing against each other on the protocol to offer higher yields to its users. For the purpose of this discussion, however, we're going to be sticking with Mochi Inu and how it attempted to accrue ridiculously high rewards for itself. Mochi Inu and its dominance on Curve. Before we understand what Mochi's play was, let's explore what it actually really is. Mochi Inu is a decentralized stablecoin protocol that also facilitates the listing of collateral assets on its platform. The users can then use that collateral to mint USDM, Mochi's native stablecoin, and use it in DeFi. Since it is a decentralized protocol, all of the actions around fees are algorithmically defined. The objective is to ensure that a variety of crypto assets can be used as collateral for minting the USDM stablecoin. The protocol states in their white papers that the USDM stablecoin is soft pegged to the USD, and that it ensures that the peg is maintained by highly capital efficient stable pegged asset pools. They also state that the value of these stablecoins are backed by over collateralized vaults subject to various credit parameters. How did Mochi Inu gain Curve Finance? Now, there are several questionable aspects around its tokenomics, the team, and the overall structure of what the protocol is. But let's focus on what actually happened on Curve. Mochi first announced the acquisition of over 1 million CVX tokens, and they plan to use it to power the USDM 3CRV and increase the yield for their LPs on the said pool. The rewards to these LPs were to be accrued in CVX and CRV. This helped them boost their liquidity pool and aided in attracting just over $100 million in liquidity. Using this, they minted free Mochi, and that was then used to mint roughly $45 million worth of USDM. Then they decided to swap USDM for DAI, and then further use the DAI to swap with ETH and or buy CVX tokens worth $46 million. They then locked those CVX tokens in Convex Finance, giving them the power to vote on higher rewards for their pool. As you can imagine, this is a repeatable cycle with no end. So theoretically, Mochi could be doing this all day long to potentially wreck the entire protocol, since the rewards on all the other pools would eventually drop, as more users concentrate on a single pool. So on the surface, it looks like a clear case of a protocol exploiting the underlying infrastructure in their favor, right? Well, it does, but this is where it gets more interesting. Curve Finance strikes back. As the team at Curve Finance was watching Mochi's rewards compound, they decided to do some digging into the protocol and its tokenomics. And the team discovered a few things. Mochi had minted a huge amount of governance token to their own team members. Contrary to what Mochi writes in their white paper, 99.5% of the circulating supply of the tokens were actually owned by the team, and this meant that USDM was effectively under-collateralized. In addition to this, the Curve team also pointed out some serious concerns about the security of smart contracts on Mochi and its founder Azim. The Curve protocol construed this as a clear governance attack, and the emergency DAO, a team consisting of about 9 members, decided that the LPs in the pool were at risk of getting rugged. Therefore, they decided to stop Mochi from receiving any more CRV rewards. The DAO reminded the LPs that taking bribes from protocols is a risky business, and highlighted that since they have the voting power, they must also understand the responsibility that comes with it. Now, there are several sides to this story. One can either look at it from the perspective that Mochi Inu was not in the wrong, given that it had merely exploited the underlying infrastructure in its own favor. The other side to this is what extent can we expect protocol founders and the core members to allow other protocols to exploit their platform? Both these perspectives notwithstanding, the truth is that there is a thin line between decentralization and using authoritative power to save a protocol. Mochi could have continued to attract LPs to their pool by continuously boosting the CRV, CVX rewards for them. This meant that a substantial amount of liquidity would have moved to a protocol which has hardly any significance within the DeFi ecosystem. Since the tokenomics of the protocol did not seem right, the smart contracts presented some serious security flaws. There was a possibility of rugging that would have bled all LPs and wrecked both Convex and Curve. Thus, the decision to kill the rewards for Mochi was not born out of a need to exercise power over the protocol, but to set a precedence for various other decentralized protocols that in instances like these, the protocol team members would have only focused on saving what they have spent thousands of hours creating. Curve Wars and the emergency DAO. Is it a true decentralization? For the first time in the history of DAOs, the power of governance was exercised by a few members, rather than the entire DAO itself. This is a first, but then so is almost everything in DeFi. As the ecosystem is maturing into what it is today, we are starting to notice the extent to which words such as decentralization and true freedom hold to extent. One could argue that what Mochi did was truly exploit the underlying infrastructure itself. If the architects of that infrastructure did not think about these possibilities when they were creating it, then why should it matter when users are simply using it for their own benefit? But there are two sides to it which we briefly touched upon and we should explain further. Number one is, could true decentralization be a myth? Bitcoin and Ethereum are branded as the epitome of decentralization in bankless money because they have successfully removed the need for a trusted intermediary. However, that may not be entirely true. Take Bitcoin for example. While it is considered true decentralized money, if it's money at all opposed to being an asset, studies have repeatedly shown that the majority of these coins are only concentrated within a few hands. While this in itself does not conclude that the digital asset is centralized, what we do hope to point out is that despite our best attempts at decentralizing these assets, they somehow end up in the hands of a few investors who have access to billions of dollars and can instantly buy bitcoins in the hundreds of thousands. If we argue that the underlying network is decentralized, then what about the fact that mining for Bitcoin is highly centralized to a few countries? If a certain miner finds it profitable to mine in a specific country, then others would follow suit. And the second point is that there are some assets in DeFi that are inadequately distributed. Take Tether for example. There have been questions raised around whether it has adequate reserves for every USDT it issues. If a regulatory authority were to check its reserves and take a step that impacts the protocol, then the entire DeFi would be at stake. Just think about the amount of assets that are being exchanged into USDT every second. The truth is that one with the heaviest pocket will dominate the market regardless of what it is. And that doesn't mean that the vision of a decentralized world is an illusion. Far from it, actually. The truth is that it's hard to decentralize and equate human nature. It is human nature to look for better yields, and greed will always be a part of the human character, whether we are in a decentralized protocol or a centralized banking institution. That is why all of the LPs rush to Mochi's USDM pool. It's not hard for us to distinguish decentralization as the one and only solution that gets to favor everyone. It is by nature not centralized, which means that the one with the most power or money or even both can lay their hands on a major portion of the assets. What the Curve's emergency DAO did was just what anyone in their position would be hoping to do. They exercised their power in a situation where they felt the users who were rushing to Mochi's LPs could be rugged and lose all of their money. What would have happened if they had not taken any action? Honestly, we would not even want to imagine that scenario. And what Mochi did was not arguably wrong too. They simply exploited the underlying system whose rules have already been laid out. Morally, yes, the hard-earned money of millions of users were at stake. So wrapping it up, is true power always held within a few hands? Or there is such a thing as true decentralization? And if you were in the position of Curve Finance, let us know what you would do in the comment section down below. Anyways guys, thank you so much for tuning into this very special episode of CoinMarketCap. Make sure you are subscribed so you're not going to miss out on next week's video. And anyways guys, this has been your host Trev, and we'll see you in the next one.